Hello, I'm Jeremy, and welcome to another episode of RevUs Reviews. I'm not a fan of the original Karate Kid. While I don't think it's one of the worst movies ever made, there just isn't that much about the Karate Kid that's actually good. The story is cliche, the villains are boring, and it feels more like an hour-long training montage rather than an actual film. Problems which do not apply to its much better, but for some reason more hated sequel, The Karate Kid Part 3. After the events of the first film, John Kreese, Johnny Lawrence's sensei, has become a broke, washout loser who vows revenge against Daniel and Mr. Miyagi. So Kreese visits Terry Silver, the founder of Cobra Kai, who now owns a toxic waste facility. Silver puts all of his business on hold and helps Kreese get revenge on Daniel and Miyagi by hiring a karate expert named Mike Barnes to challenge and humiliate Daniel. Meanwhile, Daniel's apartment complex is being redeveloped, leaving Mr. Miyagi unemployed and Daniel homeless. Miyagi invites Daniel to stay at his house, and in return, Daniel uses his college fund to help Miyagi open a bonsai shop, which Miyagi lets Daniel help him run. One of the main criticisms of Karate Kid Part 3 is that the story is a blatant rehash of the original. Let me ask you, did that story sound anything like the story of the first Karate Kid movie? I'll give you the answer. No. Because unlike the story of the first film, which is literally built on cliches, Karate Kid Part 3's story is actually original, interesting, and engaging. On top of that, Daniel and Mr. Miyagi have a more developed relationship, the film has better pacing, and it focuses more on its story than on the karate. Speaking of things 3 does better than 1, let's talk about Kreese. Unlike in the first film, where he was an unfunny comic villain, John Kreese is a very interesting character. His desire for revenge gives him an interesting edge as a villain. He's the kind of character we sympathize with but still want to lose. And what's interesting is that the film is really more about Kreese than it is about Daniel. It focuses more on Kreese and Silver's revenge plot for most of the film, while Daniel and Miyagi's plot is really more of a subplot. Which may be one of the reasons a lot of people don't like this film, as the people who love the first Karate Kid don't get to spend as much time with the characters they got to know, love, and connect with from the first film. Also, Kreese and Silver make a really good team-up. It reminds me a lot of the relationship between Jake and Elwood Blues, with Kreese being the straight guy who's a more serious villain, and Silver being the more over the top villain. They also have a really natural chemistry, making the relationship even better. And now let's talk about Silver. As I mentioned in the last episode, Terry Silver is played by Thomas Ian Griffith. And despite this film being the first Griffith has appeared in, he's fantastic. He's not really hammy in the same way as Phil Blumberg or Sanford Skolex, where they're really over the top, crazy, and the exact opposite of subtle. Silver is really devious and sleazy, and he's more over the top in his line delivery than in his actions. In addition to that, he's so good at faking being good. The first time I watched this movie, when he was acting nice and caring towards Daniel, he actually fooled me, the audience member. That is the mark of a good villain. As for Mike Barnes, he's a really good villain character. He has a lot of personality. He is very intimidating, and the rivalry between him and Daniel is very interesting. He's certainly better than the blonde-haired Tucker Carlson clone known as Johnny Lawrence. But what about Daniel and Miyagi? Are they as good as they were in the first film? Yes. Yes, they are. While Mr. Miyagi is mostly the same, Daniel has far more personality than he did in the first film, while still retaining his likable qualities. He also has a really good relationship with a girl named Jessica Andrews. But unlike Allie from the first film, this relationship is a friendship, not a romance, mainly because Jessica already has a boyfriend. This is really cool because it's rare in both film and television to see two friends of opposite genders that are not romantically involved or have a secret crush on each other. Way to subvert a common cliche, Karate Kid Part 3. And finally, let's talk about the story's execution. Like I said at the beginning, this film has really good pacing. It's really cool to see everything come together and coagulate into a coherent and suspenseful narrative. And even though, like the first Karate Kid, this film ends with Daniel winning the championship and no epilogue, I think this film makes that choice in order to conclude the story, while the original ends at the championship only because that's the only thing that mattered in that movie. In conclusion, The Karate Kid Part 3 is a fine piece of cinema. The story is interesting, the characters are engaging, and it does a great job of improving an incredibly mediocre movie. I honestly have no idea why this film is so hated by the Karate Kid community. Sure, it's not a masterpiece. Sure, it takes itself less seriously than the first, which I have no problem with. And sure, there are a few similarities to the first, like Daniel meeting a girl, challenging a student in his over-the-top karate teacher, and having the climax take place at a karate tournament. But saying that The Karate Kid Part 3 is the worst Karate Kid movie is like saying Home Alone 2 is the worst Christmas movie. Considering that this is a threequel to a franchise that was not made for me in any way, it's amazing that I like this film as much as I do. If you're a fan of the first Karate Kid movie, or sports movies in general, give this film a watch. But if you've never seen any of the Karate Kid films, let me give you some advice. See this film and maybe the second. Don't bother with the first or the one with Hilary Swank, and the rest I don't care about. That's all for now. Join me next time when I talk about a bizarre video game movie with Bob Hoskins, a dinosaur city, and a whole lot of fungus. See you then. Boppity boppity la da da. Yippity whippity. Da 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 da. Yay. Oh my god. Whew. Do 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 do.